Howdy, thanks for coming to Dynamic Disc Center City. How can I help you today? Yeah, man, absolutely. I'm looking for one of those frisbees that goes like really far. Well, we do have a lot of discs that go pretty far. How far are you throwing max distance right now? No doubt. I'll throw about like 200, maybe 220 if I really get a hold of it, but I'm looking for that disc that's going to take me over 400. Know what I'm saying? Looking to go real far, maybe impress some people while I'm out there. Yeah, man, I don't think that disc actually exists. He's saying it's my problem? What is up, YouTube fam? Robbie C here. Today we are starting a brand new series on the channel that is all about distance. Because even though I spend a lot of time talking about how unimportant it actually is for your overall game to throw super far, if I'm being 100% honest, I would like to be one of those people that throws really far. But as a coach, I want to set healthy expectations that this isn't going to be an easy or quick process that we're going to go through. It took me almost a year to get my putting to a point of extreme confidence. And when we're talking about driving, there are a lot of minuscule mechanics that move at an incredibly quick pace that's going to make it tough for us to overcome those distance barriers. So I've already spent a couple months working on my distance journey, and I wanted to bring you guys into some of the common roadblocks that I'm seeing not only players come across, but also things that I've run into myself. Here's the thing though, when it comes to throwing a disc far, whether you have great form or bad form, at the end of the day, to throw a disc far, you're going to need a disc, which is why the first video in this series is all about disc selection. When we watch professional disc golf, we see some of the big arms get out there and throw some massive shots. The common trap that you'll hear tons of beginner videos talk about is that these are not the discs that we should be looking at for beginners, especially if you want to throw max distance. In fact, I fell victim to this when I first started the game because the stamp on the nuke used to actually include maximum distance.
I'd like to throw max distance, so clearly I need a nuke, and that's a pretty incredible name.
But if you've spent any time looking around for what the right max distance disc is, that was pretty difficult. Max distance disc. Try saying that 5 times fast. The next thing you've probably heard is that you should avoid distance drivers overall and step up to maybe mid-ranges or even try to throw putters for an incredible amount of time. And yes, I would agree with people, but we're not just here to parrot other things on the internet or talk about things that I've already discussed probably in older videos. I want to talk to you, the person that's looking to throw far and wants to put a driver in your hand, and give you a few warnings and a few options that you can look at in order to start doing that. In order to find a disc that's going to work for you for max distance, it's important to first understand that there is a threshold to every single disc. When I mention threshold, you may think there's like a top end where this disc can go so far. But if that were simply the case, a pro wouldn't be able to step up and throw putters, our slowest discs, over 400 feet. The threshold I'm referring to is the amount of power and spin that must be put into the disc in order to get the disc to start reaching its potential. Because at the end of the day, in order to throw any disc far, you need to be choosing a disc that you can reach that disc's threshold. That idea of thresholds is going to be our guiding principle in how we choose our discs. But just because a disc has that threshold doesn't mean that it's necessarily out of reach for us. I want to talk about a few things you can do to adjust that threshold. And the first is just get good. Now that's not the easiest option, but it is a reality that we need to make sure we talk about early on. The reason that Andrew Marweed has a hurricane and most of us should not be throwing a hurricane is because Andrew Marweed throws better than us. So for us to match what Andrew Marweed's doing with a hurricane, this is not the right disc for us. We probably should switch to a sail. The threshold is a little easier on this to reach, and no, I'm not making a statement on Katrina Allen versus Andrew Marweed because I actually believe in sheer backhand distance. Katrina Allen can outdrive Andrew Marweed. But Katrina literally said in an interview why she's choosing the DGA disc that she's choosing is because they are easier to throw. So even people that did get good still can often choose easier to throw discs. Now I'll be one of the first to admit that there are discs you just want to be able to throw. When I started working on distance with Mike, I told him that I really wanted to be able to throw destroyers. But I've had to come to accept that if I'm looking to throw max distance, a destroyer is probably not the disc for me right now. I can throw race, which are more understable, giving me more distance without having to work it as hard to throw the disc. And for me, even easier to throw than a wraith is a turn. So the first thing when you're looking at thresholds is to look at more understable options. Rarely when I was in the field was I able to consistently get the destroyers to fly with the shot I was actually looking for. When I threw turns, even poorly, they were going as far, if not farther, than my destroyers. So always be willing to experiment with another disc that's a little more understable in the same speed or category as a disc that you really have your eyes guys are wanting to throw. And often there could be another fantastic disc or option that another manufacturer has already made. You don't have to lock yourself into one bag because there are tons of new discs being made all the time. Speaking of new discs, I want to talk about today's video sponsor, Hooligan Discs. Hooligan Discs is based out of Texas, and they're releasing 2 brand new discs tomorrow, May 27th. Those discs are the Vibe and the Yeet. You heard that right, the Vibe and the Yeet. They're both max distance drivers, and the Yeet is an overstable option that you're going to, for a lack of a better word, need to yeet if you want to get distance out of it. For most beginners, it's going to be a great utility option, which means I would recommend the Vibe. This flies very similar to the turns I was talking about for some easy distance, especially if you've got decent arm speed. My 3 favorite things about these discs so far are the stamps, the swirls, and the plastic actually feels really good. A lot of times smaller manufacturers struggle with quality control, but Hooligan seems to have nailed it on their first run. So if you're looking for some fantastic discs with some really interesting names, make sure you go check out Hooligan Discs. There'll be a link in the description below. Now, another way that you can lower the threshold required on a disc or bring it more into your range is to adjust the weight. Disc weight is something that very few experienced players talk about, but there's actually quite a few videos out there. I'm going to put a link to a video by Just Disc, or JD, who did a phenomenal job talking about disc weight overall, and honestly he did such a good job that it's not worth really kind of revisiting all of it because it's just a really good video. You should definitely check it out. But I do want to talk about some of the pros and cons of choosing lighter weight discs. While throwing a lighter weight disc does not mean that the disc goes farther, it does mean that it is easier to get the disc up to that required threshold in order to achieve those distances. The following throws were all made with Eagles, but one of them weighs 149 grams compared to the others, which are 175. There's not a dramatic change in distance, but how much effort I put into the disc was phenomenally different, meaning that this high-speed distance driver you never thought you'd be able to throw might be a little more possible when you throw it in a lighter weight. But just because you take the weight off of the disc doesn't mean that high-speed distance still isn't going to be an issue. If you only throw 200 feet right now, stepping up and throwing a lightweight 13 speed probably still isn't the right disc for you. I'd recommend stepping down to a 7 to 9 speed fairway driver, which is still a driver, and try throwing those. You'll notice that even for me, throwing a 7 to 9 speed driver, I was still able to get some pretty great distance on the disc with a lot less effort. It's something I have to remind myself that throwing a 7 to 9 speed is still probably the right choice in a lot of scenarios just because of how easily I can get the distance. So if the pros to throwing lighter weight discs are that it's easier distance and it might unlock or lower the threshold for discs that weren't reachable before, Mr. YouTube man, why would I not throw lightweight discs? And I think for that there are 2 common reasons. The first is that if you're not used to throwing lightweight discs, it's going to feel incredibly different in your hand, and when you go to throw it, you're probably going to grip lock it over to the right or left for all you left-handed folks, because it just feels different throwing that disc compared to every other one in your bag. When you carry that one special disc for those niche or max distance shots, you're going to throw it differently, and it's going to be a shot that's going to be less consistent for you because it's different than everything else you throw. Remember, we're throwing lighter weight discs not because we want to necessarily throw them farther, we're throwing them because we don't have to throw them as hard. The other drawback to lightweight discs is resistance. Because there is less weight on the disc, when it encounters an object, whether that be leaves or wind, it is less resistant overall to maintaining its intended flight path. And the bonus con of looking for lightweight stuff is that if you are trying to throw normal molds that aren't traditionally made in lighter weights, it can be incredibly difficult to hunt down those lighter weights. Our final piece that a lot of people, especially beginners, don't look at when it comes to making a disc work for them, especially for max distance, is plastic type. Traditionally, base plastics are easier to throw farther because they beat in quicker. A beat in disc is traditionally going to lower that required threshold for the disc to reach its potential and desired flight. So when you go out and grab the most expensive or fanciest plastic with the halos or the orbits, they do not beat in as fast as other options. They also traditionally run a little more overstable, which does make them more resistant to wind and conditions, but it also makes them harder to throw for that max distance shot. I'm gonna put a couple options of lighter weight plastics that exist out there, but I'd love for you to let me know in the comments below what are some of your favorite plastic types that you found to be easier to throw for your drivers. I said it in the beginning, these Halo Destroyers look amazing, and I would love to have one of these in my bag one day, not just as a utility option, but as something that I can really lean on and throw. But it's going to take a lot of time and effort to improve my form and my throwing ability so that I can actually start throwing discs like this. So in the meantime, it's just gonna sit nice and pretty on a shelf waiting for me, letting me know that every day I go to the field and work is a little more worth it, because one day day, I'm going to be able to actually throw that disc. I'm not trying to fake you into a series where at the end of these 4 weeks, we're going to be able to throw drastically farther. Is it possible? Absolutely. But is that going to be the case for most of us? I would honestly say no. But that's okay, because we're going to improve together. I firmly believe that the easiest way for you to start seeing distance gains, though, is in exactly what we talked about today, disc selection. I think it's also worth noting that when you get new discs, you're going to be a little hyped about it, so you're probably going to have some recency bias that's going to make you throw it a little better than you will on average. It's exciting to get new stuff, especially when it looks dope. So just because you threw it really well that one round right after you left the local shop still doesn't necessarily mean that it's the right disc for you. Make sure you give it some time to settle in and throw that disc, and also reach a little bit of that beat-in stage to see if it's actually fitting you and your game. Overall, I want to say thanks for watching, and I hope this video has been helpful. I really care about seeing you improve in the right way and make sure that you have longevity in this sport. So if there's ever anything I can do to help you, or things I'm not addressing that you hope I would address, feel free to shoot me a message on Instagram or shoot me an email. I do my best to respond, but like all people, I come up short because I'm just one dude trying to help. As always, I want to say thanks for watching, and I hope you have an amazing rest of the day. But for now, I'm going to leave you with the birdie.